The Airbus A380, the largest commercial aircraft in the world, rumbled with power as it hurtled down the runway at Singapore's Changi Airport. The sheer force of its 4 Rolls-Royce Trent 900 engines sent a deep tremor through the fuselage, pressing passengers into their seats. The morning sun reflected off the polished exterior of Qantas Flight 32 as it climbed into the sky, bound for Sydney with 469 souls on board. Captain Richard de Crespigny sat calmly in the left seat, his hands resting lightly on the controls. He had performed thousands of takeoffs, but each one demanded the same level of precision and focus. His co-pilot, First Officer Matt Hicks, monitored the flight instruments, his sharp eyes scanning for any deviations in altitude, speed, or engine readings. The other members of the flight crew, including Second Officer Mark Johnson and Czech Captain David Evans, settled into their routine as the aircraft ascended through 7,000 feet. Passengers relaxed, some gazing out at the endless expanse of clouds, others flipping through magazines or adjusting their in-flight entertainment screens. In the premium cabins, flight attendants moved with practiced grace, preparing for meal service. The journey had only just begun. And then it happened. A thunderous explosion ripped through the aircraft, shaking it to its core. A blinding flash erupted from the left wing, and a split second later, a deafening boom followed, reverberating through the cabin like a cannon blast. The force of the explosion sent a jolt through the entire airframe, and gasps of shock spread, like wildfire among the passengers. Those near the windows on the left side screamed as they witnessed a nightmarish sight. The number 2 engine, the inboard left engine, had disintegrated mid-flight. In the cockpit, alarms blared. The master warning panel lit up like a Christmas tree, and a cascade of error messages flooded the electronic displays. Captain de Crespigny's hands tightened on the controls as he felt the aircraft shudder. His instincts kicked in immediately. "Engine failure," Hicks reported, his voice calm but urgent. "No, 2 engine, catastrophic failure." "Confirming," de Crespigny responded. His fingers moved with practiced precision, engaging emergency protocols. "Check fire suppression." Johnson scanned the displays, his breath shallow. "Engine. Fire warning. Automatic suppression system activated." Despite the suppression system engaging, something was clearly wrong. De Crespigny's eyes darted to the wing, and what he saw sent a chill down his spine. The damage was extensive. Shrapnel from the disintegrated engine had torn through the wing's structure, puncturing the leading edge and slicing through hydraulic lines. Smoke and debris trailed from the gaping wound, and worse, fuel was visibly leaking from the wing. The aircraft, though still climbing, had lost stability. Warning messages continued to pile up on the displays. Damage to multiple systems, degraded flight controls, and a major fuel imbalance. The situation was spiraling out of control. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday!" de Crespigny called out over the radio. "Qantas 32. We have suffered an uncontained engine failure. Request immediate return to Singapore." The Singapore air traffic controller responded swiftly, their voice steady but concerned. "Qantas 32, understood. Stand by for vectoring." In the cabin, the crew worked to calm passengers, but the anxiety was palpable. The smell of burnt fuel lingered in the air, and the sight of black smoke trailing from the wing had passengers clutching their armrests. Some whispered prayers, others simply stared in shock. Flight attendants moved quickly, checking seatbelts and reassuring those who were visibly distressed. In the first-class cabin, a businessman gripped his armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. "What's happening?" he asked one of the attendants, his voice shaking. "There's been an issue with one of the engines," she replied, keeping her tone controlled. "The pilots are handling it. We are returning to Singapore." Back in the cockpit, the crew fought to regain control of the aircraft. The explosion had damaged critical flight systems, including one of the main hydraulic lines, which meant controlling the aircraft was now significantly more difficult. Worse, debris from the engine had also compromised the aircraft's electrical system, leading to partial failures in instrumentation. "Damn it," Hicks muttered, scanning the failures. "We've got issues with slats and flaps. Landing this thing won't be easy." De Crespigny nodded. "We'll do what we have to." He took a deep breath, steadying his hands. They had no choice. Despite all the failures, the aircraft was still flying. They had to bring it home. Descending back toward Singapore, the aircraft felt sluggish. The pilots worked together, manually adjusting for the fuel imbalance while navigating the wounded A380 toward Changi. The runway was in sight, but the real challenge lay ahead, landing an aircraft that had suffered massive structural damage. "Gear. Down," de Crespigny ordered. Hicks engaged the landing gear, and for a tense moment they waited. Then, 3 green lights. The gear had locked into place. It was one less problem to worry about, but far from a guarantee of safety. "Brace for landing," came the announcement over the intercom. The flight attendants, though masking their own fears, ensured passengers were in position, heads down, hands over their heads. The tension was suffocating. The aircraft descended, its damaged systems struggling to compensate. As the ground rushed toward them, de Crespigny kept a steady hand, guiding the behemoth toward the runway. The moment stretched, time slowing as the massive aircraft made its final approach. Then, contact. The landing gear absorbed the impact, tires screeching against the tarmac. A shudder ran through the aircraft, but de Crespigny held it steady, deploying the spoilers manually. The damaged reverse thrusters struggled but engaged enough to slow the aircraft. It took nearly the entire length of the runway before Qantas 32 came to a stop. For a moment, silence. Then an eruption of cheers, sobs, and sighs of relief. In the cockpit, de Crespigny exhaled slowly, glancing at his crew. "We made it." Emergency vehicles swarmed the aircraft, their flashing lights cutting through the morning haze. Flight attendants moved quickly to assist passengers, ensuring a controlled evacuation. Though shaken, everyone on board was alive. As de Crespigny stepped out of the cockpit, surveying the damage from the forward windows, he felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. But beyond that, a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had just survived the unimaginable. The aircraft sat motionless on the tarmac, its left wing marred by a gaping wound where the No. 2 engine had once been. Smoke still curled faintly from the ruined section, a ghostly reminder of the catastrophe they had just survived. Emergency. Crews swarmed around the Airbus A380, their bright uniforms a stark contrast against the metallic sheen of the aircraft's hull. Fire trucks stood poised with hoses at the ready, their nozzles aimed but unused. The fire had mercifully extinguished itself. Inside the cabin, passengers were still in shock. Some clung to their seats, hands trembling, while others whispered prayers of gratitude. Parents held their children close, their relief palpable. The flight attendants moved with efficiency, checking for injuries and assisting where they could, their own hands shaking despite their professional calm. In the cockpit, Captain Richard de Crespigny remained in his seat for a moment longer, exhaling a slow breath as the enormity of what had just transpired settled over him. The alarms had ceased their relentless cries, but the adrenaline in his veins had yet to subside. "All right," he said finally, unclipping his harness. "Let's get everyone off safely." The other pilots nodded. First Officer Matt Hicks wiped, a hand over his forehead before reaching for the radio to coordinate with emergency responders. Second Officer Mark Johnson pushed back from his console, his eyes still scanning the error messages flooding the flight systems. Despite the successful landing, the aircraft was in critical condition. The evacuation, the flight attendants, began guiding passengers toward the exits. Though shaken, they followed orders, moving as quickly as their trembling legs allowed. A few elderly passengers needed assistance, and a couple of young children clung to their parents, their wide eyes filled with confusion rather than fear. The cabin smelled of burnt fuel and something acrid that no one could quite place, but the air was clear enough for now. "Move quickly, but stay calm," a flight attendant reassured as she helped an older man down the aisle. Near the front of the aircraft, a woman in business class hesitated, gripping the seat in front of her. Her hands shook violently. I can't move," she whispered. A nearby passenger, a man with graying hair and a steady voice, gently touched her arm. "Come on, you're all right. We just have to get off this plane." She nodded stiffly, forcing herself to step forward. Outside, emergency crews were in position, ready to assist. Firefighters stood at the base of the evacuation slides, prepared to help passengers as they disembarked. Some passengers stumbled upon reaching the ground, overwhelmed by emotion, while others collapsed to their knees, weeping in relief. As D. Crespigny exited the aircraft last, after ensuring the flight deck was secured, he was greeted by a Singaporean official with a clipboard in hand. The official's expression was grave. "You're all incredibly lucky," he said, eyeing the damage to the aircraft. "This could have been much worse." De Crespigny nodded, glancing back at the Airbus. "It almost was." INI. Investigation begins. Even as passengers were ushered into the terminal for debriefing and medical evaluations, a team of investigators had already gathered near the aircraft, taking photographs and collecting initial reports. Representatives from Qantas, Airbus, and Rolls-Royce were en route, but Singaporean aviation authorities were the first to step in. An investigator approached de Crespigny, her dark eyes sharp with focus. "Captain, I need to ask you a few preliminary questions before we get the full statement." He nodded. "Of course," she flipped through her notes. "You reported an uncontained engine failure. Can you confirm what happened immediately before?" "The explosion." De Crespigny ran a hand over his jaw, thinking back to the moment it all began. "We were climbing normally, no indications of trouble. Then a loud explosion, followed by a severe jolt through the airframe. We lost control of several systems almost instantly." She scribbled something down. "And the response? Did all automated safety measures engage?" He hesitated. "Not all. Some systems failed. We had to manually override several functions, including engine shutdown and fuel balancing." She frowned slightly, then nodded. "We'll need access to the cockpit voice and flight data recorders." "They're intact," de Crespigny assured her. "We'll cooperate fully." As he spoke, a Qantas executive arrived, his face aligned with concern. "Richard, we're bringing in specialists from Sydney. Rolls-Royce engineers will be here by tomorrow." De Crespigny merely nodded. He wasn't thinking about the investigation, just yet. His focus remained on the fact that, despite everything, they had landed safely. But the deeper questions loomed. What had caused the failure? And could it have been prevented? The weight of survival. That evening, as the crew and passengers rested in a nearby hotel, de Crespigny sat by the window, staring out at the lights of Singapore. His hands still trembled slightly, a delayed reaction to the day's events. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Hicks stood there looking just as exhausted. "Mind if I come in?" "Of course," Hicks entered, rubbing the back of his neck. "I keep replaying it in my head, every second of it. It could have gone so wrong." "But it didn't," de Crespigny said firmly. "We did what we were trained to do." Hicks exhaled heavily and sat down. "Still, I've never been that close to complete disaster." De Crespigny studied his co-pilot, then reached for the hotel room's minibar, pulling out 2 small bottles of whiskey. He handed one to Hicks. "To making it back," he said, raising the bottle slightly. Hicks managed a small smile. "To making it back." They drank in silence, the weight of the day still pressing on them. Outside, the city hummed with life, indifferent to the near tragedy that had unfolded in its skies. But for those who had been on Qantas 32, life would never quite be the same again.